In the spirit of full disclosure, Larry and his wife are very good friends of ours, and they are very special people. Also, I want to give credit to Betty Osan, whose idea it was to share how to get to know people in our wonderful community in a way that we wouldn't if we were playing cards or a game or just eating out. And so her idea was to help highlight people and for them to highlight a review of their lives and things they've done and who they are and what they've been that we wouldn't know otherwise. So I have the great pleasure of having Mary Welch here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I think it is very interesting that we can talk about our lives and share it with others so that people will know who we are.
That's right.
Because in most instances, while we're here, we talk to them on a surface basis, and we need to know a little bit more about them. And thank you very much for inviting me to be involved in this.
Yes, I've also heard people say that they enjoyed a review of their lives.
Yes, and it was. And I have done my homework, and I meant to bring the one book that I have written a great deal about letters to my children, letters about to my grandparents, my parents, the people who've been an influence in my life, what is important to me, and all of this. And when I put my whole life together, it's an eclectic life because I've done so many different things in my life. I started working, and as a freshman in high school, I swept floors. 2 hours after school and all day Saturday. And the most important thing is that when I had lunch, I had 3 hamburgers and they were 15 cents a piece. So I was ready to spend 45 cents to have a good lunch. And then as I went on through high school and college, I found out that there's a lot of tremendous, wonderful people that can help me to get from point A to point B. And I talked about a couple of them. First of all, my grandparents. My grandparents were very solid, real, genuine people. They homesteaded in 1905 near Oklahoma. They had 160 acres, nothing on it. They built everything from scratch. They were very strong Christian people, and they faced emergencies, temptations, everything like that, head on. And they just realized that through the hope and love and faith in God and the Holy Spirit, that they were able to get, again, from A to B to C to D. They were wonderful people. I had great experiences with my grandparents. My parents and my grandparents were out of the same mold. And my dad was a deacon in the Baptist church. My mother taught a Sunday school class. My grandmother used to live with us every once in a while. And when I look back on, as I was going back through the history of the family, my grandmother was the CEO of the Welch family, but also my mother was the CEO of our family and also of the Hiddle family. There are 2 families. Here's the Welch family and the Hiddle family, 10 kids in each one of them. They were farmers. They had work to do. My grandfather's statement was, you know, we got to get to bed early tonight. We got a lot of work to do tomorrow. And they worked hard, and they had hesed love, which is a very key point for me. And that mean that they will be there no matter what the situation might be. That was passed from my grandfather to my father, has passed to me, and has passed on to my children and all. I remember, just quickly, the Welch family, as I mentioned, homesteaded, built everything from scratch. They had 2 mules, Kit and Julie, and they had all the farm equipment, and that's how they made. They prospered through the years. 5 days a week they worked. Saturday was the day to load up the family and the wagon and their produce and the eggs, etc., and take them into Guyman, Oklahoma to sell them. And then on the way back, my grandfather would buy 100 pounds of ice, and that was going to be put in the cooler. And then they continued their work on Saturday, but Sunday was the day of rest. And from that, they did rest. They went to church, they were strong church people, and they had very strong moral feelings. And Sunday night was the night to visit with the neighbors. They would come over and then have an ice cream social. And when that was done, the kids were over here and the parents were over here. And my grandmother's ice cream was the hit of the evening because she put cream in it, and the other people were very neglected. But that's just a quick review of my family, my grandparents and my parents, and they were really strong people to help me to be a part of who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you still like ice cream. I
still like ice cream. I remember one time on the weekend they had sale on ice cream, and I ate the whole half-gallon of ice cream just like that, and that was chocolate, and I don't eat chocolate anymore because I had my chocolate fix.
So between hamburgers and ice cream, you were fit.
I was fixed. I was fixed.
Very good.
The fact that the key point is, for me, is that my family is very important to me. And when I look at my mother and my grandmother, they were the CEOs, they were the pioneer women, and they really made things go.
Mm-hmm.
Our house in Enid was the house away, or the home away from home. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine 10 kids in one family and 10 kids in the other? They were all lived in a radius of several hundred miles, and they would drop in without any notice at all. My mother would also be able to make food for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I have very happy memories.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a neighborhood that had plenty of kids, and I remember taking day hikes, and my mother would make me a lunch, and I'd be gone all day. So that has been missing from today's youth as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Because I really have happy memories of all of these people working together to help get a better life for everyone.
Yes. And that's something we have here, is a wonderful sense of community.
You're absolutely right. And that's what the Welch family had, and the Hiddle family. I knew all my aunts and uncles. I interacted with them. We had a good time. There was acceptance, and they allowed for the difference of people, but they were still family. And that was facet love for me.
And you have published 4 books, I believe.
That is correct.
And another part of you that I don't think people here at Westminster would know much about is your referee.
Yes, I was a referee. I wore the black and white striped shirt. I refereed football for 36 years,
Wow.
basketball for 28, and umpired baseball for 10. And the reason why it was only 10 years is because football and basketball are a little bit more action-oriented than baseball, and my concentration level would wane, and I might miss a call or whatever it might be, and so I only worked for 10 years. Yes, I started officiating when I was in college. I had, my math professor was a referee, and he encouraged me. I was an athlete in high school and college. I lettered in all sports in high school, and I went to Phillips University on an athletic academic scholarship, and they didn't have any football, so I worked in basketball and baseball. I was a letterman in all of those. I was an all-conference selection. I was an all-star several times. But he got me involved in officiating. And during my freshman and sophomore year, we talked about it, and I did a little officiating intramurals. And then he had a vacancy on his football team, crew, and he invited me to join. And so during my junior and senior year, I had a full schedule of working football games. And on Friday nights, he would pick me up. I would be dressed as an official, and we would go work the game and make $12 or $15. That was enough to make food for the family for the rest of the week.
Plus, you got your exercise in.
I got my exercise, and a bit of fits in here. A good official needs to know the rules, and they need to control the game. And there are three sets of team members. There's Team A, the visitors, there's the home team, and then there's the team of the officials. That's the community that you were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
Community is very important.
Mhm.
We had I started out with, let's see, there's one official when I was working the intramural games. In football games, there became three officials. The referee was the only one who could have a whistle. The other two officials, I was the umpire, and I had a horn. And if there was a foul there, I would blow it, and the referee would hear it, and then I'd tell the referee what was happening, and we would then administer the proper penalty and et cetera.
Mhm.
So you started out, I started out with one, then we went to three, then we went to 4 officials, then we went to 5 officials, they went to 6 officials, 7 officials, and now there are 8 officials.
Wow.
And so what happens is that if you work a ball game with 3 officials, that means you have to cover a lot of different areas.
Mhm.
Whereas if you have 8 officials, you're concerned about this little area right here.
Mhm.
And that makes the difference.
Mhm.
And so officiating allowed me to continue teaching.
Mhm.
If I didn't have that extra income, I could not have taught.
Mhm.
But it was fun, and we had a community of officials. We had a group of what we would call the old men, and once we went out on the field,
Mhm.
we had over 100 years of experience,
Wow.
and I'm the only one that's left out of that group.
And I also have here that you were original member of the ACCAC Football Officials Hall of Fame.
That is correct. That is correct.
And another honor that you were given was Professor, Outstanding Professor at
That's
ASU.
correct. I want to go back to officiating for just a minute,
Mhm,
because
sure.
so many people, I saw a game yesterday, a basketball game. Here was a fan here.
Mhm.
And here was the officials working the game in a set. There were 3 officials. And he was so irate. He was jumping up and down. He was really, I could see his face getting red. And towards the end, and it was a close ball game, he got up and left. So what happens is that so many people that are so biased for one team or the other, that they forget that the officials are neutral.
Mhm.
They don't care about that.
Mhm.
The goal of the official is to make the right call and be in the right position to make the call and take the heat if some people do not agree with it. I wanted to bring my referee shirt, but I couldn't find it. Just a black and white striped shirt. As soon as I put that shirt on, 50% are for me and 50% against me. And so the only one that I can really please is myself.
Mhm.
And can you work the perfect going the game? No. There's no way. Several times I came close, from my point of view,
Mhm.
several times. But the players are so big and fast nowadays that you have to be very alert, aware of what is happening in the game.
Mhm.
And if you see someone that's getting out of line, or you go over and talk to them, you see a great big pile of players here.
Mhm.
Every once in a while, someone might want to give an arm or anything like that, and I kept talking to him, walk away, walk away, walk away. One of the other things is that when you look at officiating, I know 50% for you and 50% against you. Number one, the people are biased in the stands. They don't know the rules.
Mhm.
And you have to be so quick in making a judgment call.
Mhm.
So you have to be in position to make the call. You have to understand what the rules are. And the rules have basically that I worked with and all the other officials worked with, if someone gained an advantage, you have to call a foul.
Mhm.
And that calls judgment.
Mhm.
And if you look at the officials today, they're not young people. They're people probably in their late 30s or 40s,
Mhm.
50s, and as soon as they walk out on the field, I look at the officials and I see all these gray-haired men
Mhm.
because of their experience.
Mhm.
and because of their ability to make the call, it's the right call. The-
I remember you also saying that you liked the instant replay,
Yes,
that was,
that's a good point. The players are so big and fast today. It goes like that, you have to make a decision. And sometimes they are overturned, which I think is most important. You've got to get the call right. And that is what I think. People used to ask me, have you ever made a bad call? I said, no. I made many questionable calls. Questionable is different from a bad call.
that's right.
And the rule for officials, we worked hard on the rules, we had meetings, we had pregame conferences, we worked. There's a whole different attitude when you come as individuals, to come as a community of officials to work the game. You forget all about this. You work the game the best that you can, enforcing the rules, and that gives you a chance to interact with them, and you talk about them, and all of a sudden, you're working the game.
Do you miss it?
Yes. That's the only time, I don't say this very often, but it fits in the conversation. That's the only time that I was able to play God. Because I was in control of the game. My goal was to control the game according to the rules and making sure that no one gets injured or anything like that.
But it's funny, because you're not a power person at all.
No,
You're-
I'm not a power
You're
person.
much more
But
weak.
as soon as I put on that striped shirt, I do become a power person. And that's true. I remember when Lois and I were married many years ago, that we used this in our wedding vows. We wrote our own vows. And sometimes I will lead and you will follow. Sometimes I will lead and you will follow, and sometimes we walk side by side. And so what is happening in a game is that the officials have to be that neutral point and work as a team in calling the game and helping each other. One of the other things that has been interesting in official, you'll notice that they have a microphone with them. And that's how you communicate. And we didn't have that, so we used hand signals like this. That's all.
Well, our observation is that you and Lois walk together most of the time.
I understand that. I understand that she will lead and I will follow, but she mainly leads and I will follow because I know that she's usually right. Her ability to reason and think and see the forest as well as the trees is very, very good. So we talk about things.
Yep.
We had a partner desk in our house in Scottsdale where we lived for many years. A partner desk, it was mahogany, it had a desk on both sides. And whenever we wanted to negotiate, she would get on one side and I would get on the other side, and we were equals. And that's the way that we've tried to work in our relationship all along.
Well, as observers to that relationship, I think you and Lois do that very well.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
And also, you have a team of children.
We have a team of children. Lois and I were both divorced. We married in 1984. I went through a divorce in 1973, and I swore up and down that I would never get married. And it was for 10 years. I was single. And then I met Lois, and we were married in 1984. And we have a unique relationship. And that is that we have a contract. And the contract is renewable every March the 31st. And if we're going to renew it, we'll both agree. And if we don't, if she says, I want to leave, I said, that's fine. We have you don't need to give me any reason at all. We can dissolve it, we walk away. But since 1984, we have renewed it every year, and hopefully we will renew it again. Because life without Lois would not be a pleasant experience.
Well, I know my husband and I do, on our anniversary, we talk about what happened this last year that we didn't expect to have happen, but it did. And what things did we think were gonna happen, but they didn't. And then, after reviewing that, we'll talk about, in this next year, what kind of a relationship do we wanna have? And who do I need to be to enhance that relationship, and who do you need to be? And then for that year, we'll just say, I think you're off track.
And that's all you have to say.
That's all.
That's all you have to say. You don't have to have this big conference or anything
No.
like that.
Nope.
And so that's a great way to do that.
Or
And-
we'll say attitude adjustment.
Well, Lois has told me every once in a while that my attitude needs to be changed. I also have a saying that in my classes that your attitude determines your altitude. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
the altitude is way up
That's
here,
right.
and sometimes it's down here. And she
Right.
reminds me that that's good. You have an attitude adjustment,
Uh-huh.
and
Attitude
you just have to go that.
Mhm.
I want to go back to your other point about that I received many honors for that.
Yes, you did.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about this
Good.
up here.
Good.
About teaching of mathematics, because
Uh-huh.
I taught mathematics for 53 years.
Uh-huh.
It was fun. It was enjoyable. I saw how to get students from point A to point B. And the one comment that fits in here before I talk about this is the fact that I had some boys, I taught advanced math at Coronado High School for 30 years. And then I got my doctorate, and then I went over to ASU. And the boys came back and visited me for a while, and they said they were so grateful that I taught them to think.
Mhm.
I taught them to think.
Mhm.
And that was one of my, and I was of service to them.
Mhm.
I tried to see where they were, and I wanted them to take them where I'd like for them to be, and they worked with me, and I learned from them, and it was a good situation. From our program at Coronado, and they took one semester of mathematics at West Point, they had a major in mathematics.
Wow.
Now that is unbelievable to me.
Yes, it is.
Now, this is many years ago,
Mhm.
but the fact is that we had a program that would put these kids in a position where they could do things like that.
Mhm.
And I had two other students when I was teaching in Aurora. One of them was Tom Jr. and the other one is Frank Young. Tom Jr. had an IQ of 165. Frank was very, very close. They were very strong people, mathematically.
Mhm.
And I got them involved in summer programs at the university. Tom Jr. went to Houston, you went to Rice University. And the professors were so impressed with him, they moved him along right very well. I know that Frank became a doctor. I do not know what happened to Tom. But those kids were ready to absorb what I had to share with them
Mhm.
to get them from point A to point B.
Mhm.
So I'll come back to one of the other questions, but I want to get back to this
Yes,
over here.
please do.
Let's talk about this. One of the things that people have to understand, many years ago, there was old mathematics and there was new mathematics. Over here was basically you learn mathematics by rote. You do as I tell you. It was a product oriented. I don't care how you got the answer, but you had to get the right answer. How you got it, I don't care. But it was product oriented. It was memory. It was memory. You have to memorize. I remember people remembering. We went through in the elementary schools. You had to memorize all of the multiplication facts: 6 times 5, 7 times 2, and all of that stuff. You had to make sure that you could memorize. It was taught one way. And that means that you had to follow the rules. I remember many students in my classes was saying, well, I'll give you this example. Our grandson was having difficulty in mathematics, and so I went over to try to help him. I tried to show him the way to do it. And he says, no, my teacher told me to do it this way, and that's the way I'm gonna do it. That to me is following the rules and the algorithms and et cetera. This was individual. You didn't work with groups or anything like that. It was all individuals. And so this, in the old style of teaching mathematics, you were the sage on the stage. I know all of the things about mathematics. You do as I tell you. You follow the algorithms, and lo and behold, you'll get an A out of the class. Okay, this is the old mathematics. I was taught this way. But when I got out and working with students in 1954, I was aware of this, but I had a very strong math teacher who also knew how to explain it, and so that we could do the reasoning as well. So the new math started coming in the 1940s and the 50s. And since I was teaching in the 50s, and I was very ambitious in making sure that I could be the best math teacher that I could possibly be, I started looking at workshops and reading, going to conferences and et cetera. And this is the new mathematics. And I want to show the difference between the two. Here's thinking, and I'll show you in just a minute in an example. Here is, you have to reason. You have to be able to understand mathematics and be able to that. At ASU, I worked with elementary and secondary teachers, and we had a special goal, and that is to give them the skills and the strategies so that they could be effective teachers and answer the questions from their students so that they would understand. We worked in groups. I had tables, about 4 or 5 people at a table so that they could interact with each other. I talked to them about new ways of doing this. I had them to look at process. We worked on process a great deal. And process is how you got your product. And in this process they had to show me that they understood and could explain it to the people. I would ask a question, and this student would give me an answer. I said, fine, here's a chalk, go to the board and explain it to this. Now I worked with a selective group trying to help teachers to understand that they really need to know all of these things in order to be an effective teacher. And we talked about this, and we wanted to adopt this, and over here is the sage on the stage, and over here is that I'm the guide on the side. I told them that they are basically two different things, but you can make them do together. So I use these words, to, for, and with. If you're going to be an effective teacher, you have to know where your students are coming from. And so therefore, some students, you do it this way. Some students, you do it this way. And here's the dial. Here's the teacher going to the student. This is one way. For, you work with the students here, and then students go back this way. It's going back and forth. But the real key issue in working with students and training teachers, you had to consider the word with. So the teachers that I was working with was to help them to understand to, for, and with, so that they could have all the necessary strategies to put together to look at your students. And how did I do that? Well, I put it like this. And so on the first day of class, I would ask them to find out, since I did not know where the students were coming from at all, what is mathematics? And I'd ask them to say, what is math is? And I said, write it down. I'd give someone of the students to chalk, to write, go up to the board. We put all of that information on the board. And we started looking at that. And from that, I got a feel for where they were coming from. And then I went ahead and talked to them about my role and their role as students. My role was to help them to understand and give them strategies and have them to be able to explain it and et cetera, and have new ideas and et cetera. That was my role. Their role was to learn. And I made no bones about it. I said, you're here to learn. I'm here to help you. And so I will be the guide on this.
3.
I want to go back and pick up on a couple things that I'd mentioned before, was 2-4 and width, because this is really ties into what I'm talking about here. So the question is, how in the world do I tie all of these things together? I've talked about the old math, I've talked about the new math, I've talked about all the different strategies. How do you put these things together in order to make this to be an effective classroom and to help students learn? So I would do something like this. I would start with mathematics is and ask them to complete it. We'll put that information on the board. Second thing is that I would say, what do you want to learn out of this class? I'd put that on the board. I would tie these together and say, this is what we're doing, and my role is to be a facilitator, with the guide on the side and also a sage on the stage. So then I would say, okay, let's see how we can do this. So I'm going to give you this example right here. This is one of my favorite examples, and I've used this many, many times. I've drawn 2 lines there, and I put you right there. And I would ask you to tell me whether you are on the inside or the outside of those lines. Okay. Some people will say that you're on the inside. Some of them say that you're on the outside. And I would say, okay, what does the word inside mean to you? We will explore that. How do you know that that's on the inside? Well, you have to argue mathematically from definitions. So what is the definition of inside to you? And they would have to write it. I said, write it down. Inside means this. And they would write it. And then we would talk about that. And then I would say, what does outside mean to you? Okay, and then they would say, I said, okay, look at this diagram. How could you make, from your definition of inside and outside, what can you do to make sure that that's going to be on the inside or the outside? So what would happen in this case is that after discussion of the definition, I said, okay, and then someone would come up and write and draw a line like this. Okay, now are you on the inside or the outside of that line? And all of a sudden they're beginning to see the forest as well as the trees. And that was one of my real key topics in all of my teaching. You have to see the forest as well as the trees. So now, are you on the inside or the outside of that diagram? Okay, I'm on the inside. So how would you define inside now, knowing this information? And they would say, inside is going to be any closed figure is going to have an inside and outside. And I would ask them, are you in this room? Are you in the side of the room or on the outside of the room? And all of a sudden they were beginning to see that there's a difference between inside and outside. And you have to make sure that you can talk about this, and you could see that I've been able to take the sage on the stage to be the guide on the side and work with this. I had many, many problems. One quickly. I know that we're short on time. I happened to be attending a conference, an NCTM conference in New Orleans. And I was Lois and I were walking down the street, and this young boy came up and said, if you'll give me $1, I can tell you where you got those shoes. Okay. And he kept on going. And then pretty soon, I said, I know where I got my shoes. They're on my feet. And then I asked him, I can give you another one. What is 1/2 of 18? I put 18 up here. So what is 1/2 of 18? 9. How do you know that it's 9? I would go through that whole repertoire, explain to me why you think it's 9, show me what it is. I said, do you always agree? Would you agree? Agree, disagree? The questions that I used as well. Do you agree or disagree that 9 is always 1/2 of 18? They said, yes. I said, are you willing to put any money on that? Are you willing to put any money on that? And someone would say, I'll put $1. I said, well, why don't you make it $5? And we go on through there. So then all of a sudden, I draw a line like this. What is 1/2 of 18? It's 10. So you have to define what you mean by a half. Those are the types of problems at the beginning of class that I would help them to see, that there's a product and a process, and you have to be able to think. I close with this particular example. I use this many, many times. I'm giving you these numbers right here. 2, 6, 3, 6, 2, 3. You can only use them once. Add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Nothing else. I want you to make the biggest numbers that you can get out of this. So they start saying, oh, 6 times 6 is 36, times 9 times 4. Okay, that's a possibility. But what happens now if you do 6 times 3 times 2 times 3, then times 6 times 2 times 2. And all of a sudden you're beginning to see that there are many different answers. So this is...
And we can see, Larry, why you were elected Professor of the Year.
Yes. And so I use you have to give me the largest number. And I get different numbers. I said, what makes the difference? Why did you choose it that way? And all of a sudden, they're beginning to see, again, that process and product and the trees and the forest. Then I could do it this one right here, the smallest number. What is the smallest number that you can get? Well, the smallest number is 0, because you can manipulate these numbers and end up in multiplication and you end up with 0. But then the best one is this one right here. You have to take all of these numbers and you have to add, subtract, multiply, divide. That's all you have. And you have to get a total of 50. Now that's much more difficult. And pretty soon they start seeing that so one student will come up with an answer. This student did it over here. We put them all on the board. And it shows you again that mathematics is not only one way. There's many ways to learn mathematics and manipulate the numbers. Okay.
And there are many different kinds of professors, and you would have been an outstanding one.
Okay, now, I close with this. So what did my students think of me? First of all, they thought I was crazy when the first day they came into class. Who's this guy? This is not a math class. But over the semester, they saw what I was trying to do. And I'd like to read just a couple of the evaluations that they give me. This class enriched my understanding of the value of having a large repertoire of strategies in presenting the curriculum to ensure that all students will succeed. I wanted my students to succeed. I learned from you, you learned from me. This class was the first time I ever used manipulatives to learn math, and what an experience that was. I also feel I was asked to reason more in this class than any other math class in my experience. That's a strong statement. Hence, we were specifically encouraged not to rely on algorithms until we could justify the reasoning behind them that really made me think. And I close with this one. If you always let a student give an answer without justification, you will be missing an opportunity to make sure they actually understand what they are doing. So far, I feel this is the one class that is prepared to be the most for becoming a teacher. And that's how I left my students. I also supervised student teachers. I put on workshops across the country on creatively teaching mathematics, and I helped them to realize that mathematics is enjoyable, it can be learned by everyone, you can be successful, but you as a teacher, elementary and secondary, must have the content knowledge, you must have the strategies to make sure that you reach all the students by using to, for, and with in your presentation. I've received many honors for my classes, for my teaching. I've taught for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. I've been aboard ship for 3 months teaching mathematics. I helped them again see the forest as well as the trees. I presented workshops. I've written my books. But the most outstanding award that I received was the Charles Wexler Award. Charles Wexler was a milestone, a beautiful, a wonderful teacher at ASU. He helped ASU to get on the map in the mathematics department. And when he retired, they made a scholarship grant. And I received the award in 1993 for being the outstanding mathematics professor in the mathematics department. That's a high reward. And one I truly treasure, because it came from my students, and my students helped me to be, my ratings were very, very high, and we enjoyed each other's company, and we enjoyed learning together. So, that's the end of that. Now it's time for what I would normally do in my classroom. We have a summary of what we have talked about today.
Well, I would like you also to share the philosophy.
Well, the philosophy is very, very, very simple. My role as a teacher is to help you to be successful and understand mathematics and help you to get from point A to point B and to realize that mathematics is an integral part of everyone's daily lives.
But you've also shared what you are is God's gift.
Yes, yeah, I want to come to that. I think
Okay.
that one of my other phrases that I used a lot of different phrases. I firmly believe, very strongly, that who you are is God's gift to you, and what you do with your life is your gift to God. We all have talents. God has given all of us talents. And what we need to do is to recognize those talents and make maximum use of them.
Mhm.
That would be one of the summary. I have a couple other things that basically describe who I am. And hopefully this discussion has shown you that the whole person is the sum of its different parts. If I had to define myself in one word, I would say eclectic, because I've done many, many things, and I've taken this and this variable, and I put them all together in who I am and who I am. And this is just a couple other things to describe who I am. I think God loves me, and my role is to follow in the footsteps of Jesus the Nazarene and be of service to others and a role model for others. That's one. I also knew that other people, there are always people smarter than I am, and I can learn by asking questions. So we've talked about that before.
That's right.
in our discussions. The other one I realized is that I'm not indispensable. When I'm God, life does go on. And so the thing for me to do is just to be the best that I possibly can. There'll be peaks and valleys, and my role is to take the valleys into peaks. And that is, I call that the valleys, I call that the wilderness. And I think of the Israelites when God led them out of Egypt into the promised land, that God was guiding them. And I know that God has guided me many, many times out of the wilderness into the promised land. I can't change yesterday. I don't know what tomorrow's going to be. So today is the day that God has given me, and I want to make the most of it in whatever I do. I want to integrate the fruits of the Spirit in my life, and that's joy and peace and kindness and generosity and faithfulness and self-control. All of those, I want to integrate those into my life on a daily basis. And the last one that I thought, since God has given me talents, is for me to realize that no matter what happens today, there will be a tomorrow. And in that tomorrow, today you can keep on trucking and make tomorrow better than today. And when I do that, I am able to say, that's who I am, that God has made me, and my role is to use my talents to make God proud of me. That's who I am.
Yes, and I also would say you're curious, you're incredibly compassionate, and just a warm, caring human being.
Well, you're very kind.
That does, well, you're very kind, and you do so many things that people don't even know about.
Well, and you know, I don't need any of the notoriety.
Mm-hmm. But that's what makes you very special.
Well, it's
Very special.
Well, I think this has been a very positive thing for me, and hopefully for you.
Absolutely.
And you could show this, who Larry is, and through our dialogue, you can also see who Sharon is. And we would put it together, and the goal again is to take A and B and put it together
To a we.
to we.
That's right.
And that's it.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I've enjoyed your contributions
Okay.
super much.